My husband sued me for full custody, claiming I was mentally unstable. My daughter asked the judge, "Can I show you what Daddy did?" When the screen lit up, the judge ordered the courtroom doors locked. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today on this extraordinary journey. I invite you to prepare a warm drink, settle into your favorite cozy corner, and let the tension of the day melt away. Now let us begin this story together. On the day my life was supposed to end, the courtroom smelled of lemon polish and old paper. That specific scent will haunt me forever. My husband, Preston, sat across the aisle in his $3,000 Italian suit, checking his watch every few minutes as if waiting for a boring meeting to wrap up. He didn't look at me. He hadn't looked at me, not really, in years. Next to him, his attorney was organizing a thick stack of papers detailing exactly why Meredith was unfit, mentally unstable, and undeserving of custody of our 7-year-old daughter, Ruby. The judge was reading the final verdict. Every word felt like a stone pressing down on my chest. I was losing my house. I was losing my dignity. Worst of all, I was about to lose custody of the only person in this world who mattered to me. I gripped the edge of the table so hard my knuckles turned white, fighting to keep my breathing steady, desperate not to give Preston the satisfaction of seeing me cry. He had won. His money, his connections, and his cruel lies had won. But just then, the heavy oak doors at the back of the room creaked open. A sudden hush fell over the gallery. We all turned. Standing there, looking smaller than I had ever seen her in that vast room, was my daughter, Ruby. She wasn't supposed to be here. She was clutching her backpack tightly against her chest, her eyes wide with fear. But she didn't run to me. She didn't run to her father either. She walked straight toward the judge's bench, her little sneakers squeaking against the marble floor. In her hands, she held a cracked, taped-together tablet that I thought had broken months ago. Looking up at the formidable man in the black robe, she asked a question that made my blood run cold. "Your Honor, can I show you something? Daddy said, 'Don't let Mommy know, but I think you should see it.'" The judge paused. Preston half rose from his seat, panic flashing in his eyes for the very first time. What happened next did not just change the verdict. It changed everything. But before I tell you what played on that screen and what caused the judge to order the bailiffs to lock the doors, I need to tell you how we got here. I need to tell you how a woman who thought she had a perfect marriage ended up sitting in that chair, waiting to be destroyed. Before we begin this journey together, please take a moment to like this video and comment below with the city or state you are listening from. Knowing I am connected with friends across the country is a wonderful encouragement. Thank you for your kindness. Now let us go back to the morning everything crumbled. Part 1. The Wall of Silence and the Forgotten Wife. The morning my world fell apart began with the smell of burnt toast and the suffocating silence that had become the background music of my life. It was a Tuesday in November, one of those crisp, gray Connecticut mornings where the frost clings to the windows like lace. I had been up since 5:30. That was my routine. I moved like a ghost through our large, beautiful suburban kitchen, careful not to clink the pans or let the cabinet doors slam. In 15 years of marriage, I had learned that Preston valued nothing more in the morning than serenity. He needed his environment seamless, efficient, and quiet. I wasn't just a wife. I was the stage manager of his successful life. I placed his vitamins next to his plate. I did a final check on the collar of his white dress shirt, ensuring it was starched exactly to his liking. I kept his keto-friendly almond flour pancakes in the warming drawer. Everything had to be flawless. I told myself it was a habit of love. But deep down, I knew it was a habit of fear. Not fear of physical harm, but fear of his disapproval. Fear of that withering sigh he would make if the coffee was lukewarm, or if I asked a question while he was reading the morning news on his phone at exactly 6 a.m. I heard his footsteps coming downstairs. Heavy, rhythmic, confident. Preston walked like a man who owned the ground beneath him. He entered the kitchen smelling of expensive aftershave and success. He didn't say good morning. He walked past me as if I were part of the appliances and took his seat. "Coffee," he said, staring at his phone without looking up. I poured the steaming dark roast into his favorite mug and placed it quietly at his right hand. "Here you go, honey," I said, my voice sounding too eager, too desperate for even a shred of connection. "I used those beans you brought back from the city." He took a sip, frowned slightly, and set the mug down hard. "It's bitter, Meredith. You ground the beans too fine again." My chest tightened. "I'm sorry. I used the setting you showed me last week." "Well, fix it for tomorrow," he muttered, scrolling through an email. "I have a board meeting at 10. I need to be sharp, not distracted by bad coffee." I stood by the counter, wringing my hands in my apron. I wanted to tell him the grinder was slipping. I wanted to tell him I had a headache for 3 days. I wanted to ask him why he hadn't touched me in 6 months. but I swallowed it all. Silence was safer. I looked at him, the distinguished gray at his temples, the sharp line of his jaw. He was a handsome man. He was the man I had given up everything to follow. I used to be an interior designer. I had talent. I had clients. But when we got married, Preston told me his wife didn't need to work. He wanted a partner who would manage the home, raise children, and host dinner parties. He wanted a legacy, he said. And I, young and blindly in love, agreed. I thought I was building a life. I didn't realize I was slowly erasing myself. The heavy atmosphere lifted only when we heard the thud of little feet running down the hall. "Daddy! Mommy!" Ruby burst into the kitchen. Her hair was a wild nest of morning curls. Her pajamas were buttoned wrong. She was the sun in our gray sky. 7 years old, with eyes that saw too much and a heart that felt too deeply. Preston's face transformed instantly. The cold, unyielding mask dropped, replaced by a bright, paternal smile. He put his phone down. "There she is," he boomed, opening his arms. "There's my little genius. Come here, Ruby Doe." Ruby giggled and scrambled onto his lap. "Are you going to work again, Daddy?" "I have to, sweetie. Daddy has to make the money so we can keep this big house and buy you all the Lego sets you want. You want that new Mars rover set, don't you?" "Yes," Ruby cheered. I watched them from the sink, a painful lump forming in my throat. He was so warm with her. Why couldn't he spare a fraction of that warmth for me? Was I that unlovable? I set a plate of scrambled eggs in front of Ruby. "Eat up, sweetie," I said softly. "The bus will be here in 20 minutes. Preston checked his watch, a Rolex I had saved for 2 years to buy him for his 40th birthday. "All right, playtime is over. I'm off." He stood up, grabbing his briefcase and smoothing his jacket. He kissed the top of Ruby's head. "Be good. Listen to your mother," he said mechanically, like reading a script. He moved toward the garage door. "Preston," I called out. "Are you home for dinner tonight? I was thinking of making that beef stew you like." He didn't turn around. He opened the door, letting in a blast of cold November air. "Don't wait up. I have a client dinner. I'll be late." And then he was gone. No goodbye kiss. No, "I love you." Just the heavy click of the door closing and the roar of his luxury car fading down the driveway. I stood in the silence, the ghost of his aftershave lingering in the air. I felt invisible. I looked at Ruby, happily eating her eggs, completely unaware that her mother's heart was breaking a little more each day. I told myself it was just a phase. Men get stressed. Work is hard. I just needed to try harder, to be a better wife, to be quieter, more perfect. I spent the morning cleaning a house that was already spotless. I scrubbed floors until my knees ached. I reorganized the pantry. I tried to wipe away the anxiety gnawing at my insides. At noon, just as I was finishing a load of laundry, the doorbell rang. It was a courier. "Delivery for Meredith Miller," the man said, handing me a thick, heavy envelope. My heart skipped a beat. I wasn't expecting anything. I signed for it, my hands shaking slightly. The return address was a law firm downtown, Vance and Associates. I didn't recognize the name. I went into the living room and sat on the edge of the beige sofa Preston had chosen. I tore open the seal. I pulled out a stack of stiff legal documents. The words at the top of the page blurred before my eyes, then focused with terrifying clarity. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Petitioner, Preston Miller. Respondent, Meredith Miller. I couldn't breathe. The room began to spin. I turned the pages, reading frantically. He wasn't just asking for a divorce. The accusations jumped off the page like physical blows. Mental instability. Failure to contribute to the household. Requesting full physical and legal custody of the minor child, Ruby Miller. Requesting exclusive use of the marital residence. He wanted everything. He wanted the house. He wanted the money. He wanted Ruby. He was discarding me like trash. "No," I whispered, the sound catching in my throat. "No, this isn't real." I stood up, the paper scattering across the floor. I need to call him. This has to be a mistake. A prank, maybe? But deep down, I knew. The coldness, the late nights, the criticism. It had all been leading to this. Suddenly, I heard a sound that turned my blood to ice. The crunch of tires on the gravel driveway. The engine cutting out. A car door slamming. Preston was back. The front door opened with a terrifying calmness. Preston walked in, not with the hurried energy of a man who forgot a file, but with the slow, deliberate pace of an executioner. He didn't look surprised to see me standing there, pale and trembling, surrounded by the scattered legal papers. In fact, he looked relieved. He closed the door behind him and locked it. The click of the deadbolt echoed through the open foyer like a gunshot. "I see you got the mail," he said. There was no emotion in his voice. It was casual, as if he were commenting on the weather. I stared at him, my hands shaking at my sides. I couldn't find my voice. The man standing before me looked like my husband, wore my husband's clothes, but his eyes were the eyes of a stranger, cold, empty, and cruel. "Preston," I finally choked out, tears burning my eyes. "What is this? Is this a joke? You want a divorce?" He walked past me into the living room, stepping right over the pages of the petition as if they were garbage. He moved to the bar and poured himself a glass of whiskey, even though it was barely past noon. "It's no joke, Meredith. It's a rescue mission for me and Ruby." "A rescue?" I gasped, the absurdity of the word hitting me. "From what? I have given you my entire life. I gave up my career. I gave up my friends. I cook for you. I clean for you. I raise our daughter." He turned around, his glass clinking against his wedding band, a ring that suddenly felt like a lie. "Look at you," he sneered, his lip curling with distaste. "Look at yourself, Meredith. You're pathetic. You're a glorified maid. Do you really think a man like me, a man who closes $1,000,000 deals before lunch, wants to come home to this?" He gestured vaguely at my comfortable sweater and leggings, my messy bun, my tear-stained face. "You're outdated. You're boring. You have no ambition." "I have no ambition because you asked me to stay home," I screamed, the injustice burning in my chest. "You told me you wanted a traditional wife." "I changed my mind," he said coldly, taking a sip of his drink. "People grow. I grew. You didn't. You stagnated. And frankly, I'm tired of dragging you along." "But full custody—" I pointed a trembling finger at the papers on the floor. "You're trying to take Ruby. You can't do that. I'm her mother. I'm the one who takes her to school, helps her with her homework, holds her when she has a nightmare. You barely see her." Preston laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "And that is exactly why I need to take her. You're making her soft. You're making her weak, just like you. Ruby needs a role model who understands success. She needs a mother figure who is sharp, sophisticated, and capable, not a housekeeper." "Who?" I whispered, a chill running down my spine. Is there someone else?" He didn't answer right away. He just smiled, a small, cruel smirk that told me everything I need to know. "That is none of your concern," he said, "but let's just say Ruby deserves better, and my lawyers are the best in the state." "We have proof, Meredith. We have documented evidence of your mental instability." "Instability?" I stepped back, confused. "I am not unstable. I am perfectly sane. Are you crazy?" He took a step toward me, invading my personal space, using his height to intimidate me. "You cry at the drop of a hat. You're forgetful. You become hysterical when things don't go your way. Remember last week when you screamed at Ruby at the mall?" "I didn't scream at her," I protested, backing up until I hit the wall. She was running toward the escalator and her shoelace was untied. I was afraid she would fall. I was protecting her. "See?" Preston said softly, his voice dropping to a sinister whisper. "You're getting hysterical right now, just like it says in the reports." "What reports?" "You'll see them in court," he said. He finished his drink and set the glass on the mantelpiece. "Here's how this is going to go. You're going to sign these papers. You're going to agree to the terms. You'll get a small stipend, enough to rent a studio apartment somewhere far away from here, and you leave Ruby with me." "I will never sign that," I spat, a sudden surge of anger cutting through my fear. "I will fight you. I will tell the judge everything." Preston's face darkened. The veneer of civilization was entirely gone now. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my flesh. "You have no money, Meredith. You have no job. You have no connections. I've managed our finances for 15 years. And who do you think a judge is going to believe? A successful CFO with a spotless record, or an assetless, emotional, unemployed housewife?" He leaned in close, his breath smelling of whiskey and mints. "If you fight me, I will ruin you. I will leave you on the street. I will paint you as so unstable that you'll be lucky to get supervised visitation once a year. Do not test me." He pushed me away. I stumbled, falling onto the rug, landing right on top of the legal papers. "I'm going to pack a bag," he said, straightening his tie. "I'll be staying at a hotel for the next few days until my lawyers get an eviction order for you. Have your things packed and be out by the weekend." He walked toward the stairs, leaving me on the floor, sobbing in a beautiful house that no longer belonged to me. I felt small. I felt broken. I felt completely defeated. But as I watched him walk up those stairs, treating me like an insect he had just stepped on, a tiny spark ignited deep in my stomach. It wasn't hope. Not yet. It was the raw, primal instinct of a mother who had just been threatened. He wanted a war. He had no idea what a mother would do to keep her child. After Preston left, the house fell into a terrifying quiet. I sat on the floor for what felt like hours, watching dust motes dance in the afternoon sun. My brain, usually so orderly, was a chaotic storm. How had I missed this? How had I let things get this bad? But as the initial shock began to fade, replaced by a cold, aching clarity, I realized I hadn't missed the signs. I had ignored them. I had buried them under layers of excuses because the truth was too painful to face. Think back 6 months. That was when his business trip started to increase. Preston had always traveled, maybe once a month, to Chicago or New York, but suddenly he was gone every weekend. Emergency client meetings, he would say. Merger negotiations. He would come home smelling of expensive hotel soap and a distinct woodsy perfume that absolutely did not belong to me. When I asked him about it, he would roll his eyes. "It's the room fragrance at the Ritz, Meredith. Don't be paranoid. It's unbecoming." So I stopped asking. I told myself I was the crazy one. Then there were the mood swings. He became critical of everything. The way I dressed, frumpy. The way I laughed, too loud. He stopped wearing his wedding ring at home, claiming it irritated his skin after playing golf. I swallowed that lie too. But the biggest red flag, the one that should have made me run for the hills, was the money. About 3 months ago, I tried to buy Ruby a new winter coat online. The card was declined. When I called Preston, he flew into a rage. He told me I was spending too much on groceries, said the market was down, and we needed to tighten our belts. He put me on a strict cash allowance. He canceled my access to the main credit cards, saying he needed to consolidate debt. Like a fool, I handed them over. I trusted him. He was the financial expert after all. "I need to know," I whispered to the empty room. "I need to know how bad it is." I dragged myself up from the floor and ran to Preston's home office. He usually kept it locked, but in his arrogance today, the door was ajar. I rushed to his desktop computer. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely type. I tried to guess his password. Ruby 2015? No. Meredith? Absolutely not. I tried his birthday. No. Then I thought of the new car he was obsessed with. Aston Martin 007. The screen unlocked. I didn't care about his emails right now. I went straight to the banking portal. We had a joint savings account, our emergency fund, and Ruby's college fund. The last time I had seen a statement, over a year ago, there was nearly $300,000 in it. It was money from the sale of my condo before we married, plus his bonuses. I clicked on savings. The page loaded. The breath caught in my throat. I blinked, thinking my eyes were playing tricks on me. I refreshed the page. $0. "Oh my God," I gasped, clutching my chest. "Oh my God, Preston." I clicked on the transaction history. The screen was a sea of red. It hadn't been a one-time major withdrawal. It was a systematic draining of our life. $5,000 here, $10,000 there. All transferred to an entity called Sterling Consulting LLC, and another account in the Cayman Islands. He had been stealing our money for months. He had emptied Ruby's college fund. He had taken every single cent of the safety net I thought we had. I checked the checking account. There was $500 left, $500 to my name to survive on. Panic, cold and sharp, gripped my lungs. I was hyperventilating. I was a 42-year-old woman with no job, no resume for the last 15 years, and absolutely no money. He hadn't just left me. He had crippled me. He wanted to ensure I couldn't hire a lawyer. He wanted to ensure I couldn't fight back. I clicked on the credit card statements. As I scrolled down, my stomach churned. While he was telling me to tighten our belts for groceries, he was spending thousands. Tiffany & Co., $4,500. The Four Seasons, $2,800. Saks Fifth Avenue, $1,200, women's handbags. I hadn't received any jewelry, I hadn't stayed at the Four Seasons, and I certainly didn't have a new handbag. He was using my daughter's future to fund a new life with someone else. The anger that washed over me in that moment was different from the sadness. It was hot. It was blinding. I printed everything. I printed the zero balances. I printed the transfers. I printed the jewelry receipts. I used up all the paper in the printer and went to the closet for more. As I reached for the paper, my hand brushed against a box on the top shelf. It was an old, dusty box labeled Meredith's Sketches. I pulled it down. Inside were my old sketchbooks, my drafting compass, my expensive architectural pens, the tools of a career I had once abandoned. I touched the cold metal of the compass. I remembered who I used to be. I used to manage construction sites. I used to negotiate with contractors. I used to be strong. Preston had convinced me that Meredith the architect was too hard, too masculine. He had shaped me into Meredith the housewife. But Meredith the housewife wasn't going to survive this. Meredith the housewife was broke and heartbroken. If I wanted to save Ruby, I had to find that old version of myself. I had to stop crying and start calculating. The phone in my pocket buzzed. It was a notification from the school app. Bus arriving in 10 minutes. Ruby. I wiped my face hard with my sleeve. I couldn't let her see me like this. I grabbed the stack of printed evidence and hid it under my mattress. I washed my face with cold water. I wasn't just fighting for money anymore. I was fighting for my daughter. And Preston Miller had made a fatal mistake. He thought taking my money would make me weak. He forgot that a mother cornered is the most dangerous creature on earth. The next morning, after I sent Ruby off on the school bus with a fake smile so bright it made my face ache, I knew I needed help. But who? Over the years, Preston had slowly isolated me from my friends. They're jealous of our lifestyle, he would say, or they're a bad influence. Now I realized it was a strategic move to leave me helpless when the end came. I sat in my car staring at the steering wheel, my mind racing. I needed someone who knew Preston, someone who knew his secrets but wasn't under his thumb. And then a name popped into my head. Sarah. Sarah had been Preston's executive assistant for 5 years. She was efficient, kind, and she always texted me to remind me of Ruby's birthday. But 6 months ago, she was abruptly fired. Preston told me she was stealing office supplies, but it had sounded out of character. Sarah was the type of person who would bring back a pen if she accidentally took it home. I found her number in my old contacts. My thumb hovered over the call button. Would she even talk to me? I was the wife of the man who fired her. I dialed. It rang 4 times. Hello? Her voice was guarded. Sarah, it's Meredith Miller. Silence. Then a heavy sigh. Mrs. Miller, I was wondering when you call. My heart leapt. You were? I heard he filed. Word travels fast in the corporate world, even to us ex-employees. Sarah, I need to talk to you. Please, I don't know who else to turn to. An hour later, we met at a greasy diner on the edge of town, a place Preston wouldn't be caught dead in. Sarah looked tired. She was nervously stirring her coffee when I slid into the booth across from her. I don't have much money, Sarah, I said, getting straight to the point. I can't pay you for information, but he's trying to take Ruby. He's taken everything. Sarah looked up, her eyes softening. He's a monster, Meredith. I tried to warn you, but I couldn't get past his gatekeepers. Why did you really get fired? I asked. Sarah looked around to ensure no one was listening. I didn't get fired for stealing supplies. I got fired because I saw the emails. I saw the travel itineraries with her. Her? I leaned in. Who is she? Sarah, please? Sarah hesitated, fear flickering in her eyes. He made me sign an NDA. If I talk, he can sue me into bankruptcy. He's already suing me into bankruptcy. I reached across the table and grabbed her hand. He emptied Ruby's college fund. He's left us with nothing. Please, Sarah, I'm drowning. Sarah bit her lip. She looked at my desperate face, then down at her coffee. Sterling? She whispered. Look into Sterling Consulting. I saw that name on the bank transfers. I said, Is that a company? It's a shell company, Sarah said quickly, keeping her voice low, but it's named after her, Bianca Sterling. Bianca Sterling. The name meant nothing to me. She's a psychologist, Sarah revealed, dropping a bombshell. She was brought in last year as a corporate consultant for the firm, doing corporate wellness, leadership coaching, that kind of thing. Preston became infatuated with her. Or rather, she got her claws into him. A psychologist? I felt a wave of nausea. He was leaving me for a psychologist? It's worse than that, Meredith. Sarah leaned closer. She's not just his mistress. She's his strategist. I overheard them talking in his office once. She was telling him exactly how to handle you. She told him to cut off your funds slowly so you wouldn't notice until it was too late. She told him to start documenting your emotional outbursts. She masterminded this entire divorce plan. I leaned back, gasping for air. This wasn't just a midlife crisis affair. This was a calculated psychological dismantling of my life, orchestrated by a professional. Why? I whispered. Why go to all this trouble? Why not just leave? Because of the prenup, Sarah said. Or rather, the lack of one. You've been married 15 years. In this state, you're entitled to half of everything. Preston is worth millions. He's too greedy to give you half. So, they came up with a plan to make you look unfit, to turn you into the villain so a judge would award everything to him. Tears stung my eyes. It was diabolical. It was so thorough. Does he know you know? I asked. He suspected. That's why he fired me. He threatened to blackball me from every firm in the city if I spoke out. Sarah squeezed my hand. I can't testify for you, Meredith. I can't go up against his lawyers. They'll ruin me. But I can point you in the right direction. Check the dates of the transfers. Cross-reference them with his business trips to Switzerland. He's hiding assets offshore, and be careful. Bianca is smart. She knows how to manipulate people. She's manipulating him, and he's manipulating you. I left the diner shaking, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was adrenaline. I had a name, Bianca Sterling, and I knew their game. They were gaslighting me on an industrial scale, but knowledge wasn't enough. I needed a lawyer, a shark. But sharks cost money, and I was broke. I drove home, my mind racing. I had to liquidate the only thing Preston hadn't touched. I went straight to my closet and pulled down that hidden box from the top shelf. Not the sketches this time, but the velvet pouch inside. My grandmother's vintage emerald necklace, and my professional drafting set. The solid silver compasses, the German engineer technical pens. They were my pride and joy, symbols of a career I hoped to return to one day. I looked at them, then at the photo of Ruby on my nightstand. For you, I whispered. I stuffed them into my purse and drove to a pawn shop in a less savory part of town. The pawn shop smelled of stale cigarettes and desperation. It was a world away from the country club Preston frequented. I stood at the counter feeling exposed, clutching my grandmother's emerald necklace and my professional drafting set. The pawnbroker, a heavy-set man with thick glasses and sausage fingers, examined the necklace through a loop. It's vintage, I said, my voice trembling. Art Deco. My grandmother left it to me. The insurance appraisal was $10,000. Insurance value ain't street value, lady, he grunted. He tossed the necklace on a scale. And these drafting tools. Who uses these anymore? Everyone's on computers. They are solid silver antique German ruling pens, please. He looked at me, taking in my designer coat that was a few seasons out of date and the frantic look in my eyes. He knew I had no choice. $3,000 for the lot, he said. $3,000? The necklace alone is worth... Take it or leave it. I swallowed my pride. $3,000. It was barely enough for a retainer, let alone a trial, but it was $3,000 more than I had this morning. I'll take it, I whispered. I walked out of the pawn shop with a roll of cash in my purse, feeling both lighter and heavier. I had just sold my past to save my future. I didn't go to the glass and steel skyscrapers downtown. I knew those firms. They charged $500 an hour just to answer the phone. Instead, I drove to a part of town where the buildings were brick and the signs were hand-painted. Sarah had given me a name before I left the diner. Elias Henderson. He's old school, she had said, and he hates bullies. Mr. Henderson's office was above a dry cleaner. The stairs creaked. The waiting room had magazines from 2018, but when I walked into his office, I saw stacks of case files everywhere. Not messy, but lived in. Mr. Henderson was a man in his late 70s, wearing a cardigan that had seen better decades. He had a wild mane of white hair and eyes that looked like they could cut glass. Mrs. Miller, he said, his voice raspy, gesturing to a chair with duct tape on the armrest. Your husband is Preston Miller, the hedge fund guy. Yes, I said, sitting down. How did you know? I read the papers. I know the sharks in this town. Vance is representing him, right? Yes. Henderson let out a dry chuckle. Vance, the man who would sue his own mother for parking in the wrong spot if there was $1 in it? He looked at me over his glasses. You don't have the money to fight Vance, Mrs. Miller. Why are you here? I reached into my purse and pulled out the roll of cash. I set it on his desk. Then I pulled out the printed bank statements showing the zero balances. This is everything I have, I said, my voice steady. He stole everything. He stole my daughter's college fund. He's trying to take my child and tell the world I'm crazy. I don't need a lawyer who's doing this for the money, Mr. Henderson. I need a lawyer who's doing this because he hates men like Preston. Henderson picked up the bank statements. He scanned them in silence. His brow furrowed. He picked up the cash and flipped through it with his thumb. He left you with nothing. Zero. And he's claiming you're unstable. He's got a psychologist report from his mistress. Henderson snapped his head up. A slow smile spread across his weathered face. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of an old wolf who had just caught the scent of prey. Conflict of interest, he muttered. Fraud. Financial abuse? He tossed the cash back to me. Keep your money, Mrs. Miller. You'll need it for groceries. As for your retainer. He opened a drawer and pulled out a yellow legal pad. We're doing this on contingency. I take a percentage of what we win back. And looking at these transfers, we're going to win back a lot. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a low growl. Listen to me carefully, Meredith. This isn't a divorce anymore. This is a war. He wants to play dirty. Good. I invented dirty. But you have to be strong. You have to go back to that house. You have to live with him. You have to make him think he's won. Can you do that? I have to live with him? I shuddered. If you leave the marital residence, he can claim abandonment. You stay put. You take his insults. You let him flaunt his ego. While he's busy gloating, we're going to dig deep. He handed me a pen. Now, tell me everything about this Bianca Sterling. I took the pen. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a client. I felt like a soldier reporting for duty. She's a corporate psychologist, I said, and she smells like sandalwood and deception. Living under the same roof as Preston after the divorce papers were filed was like living in a minefield. The air was thick with tension. Every room felt like a battleground. Following Mr. Henderson's advice, I moved into the guest room at the end of the hall. I installed a lock on the door. Preston, in his victorious arrogance, didn't kick me out. He wanted me there. He wanted an audience to witness his triumph. He seemed to derive a sick pleasure from watching me count pennies for groceries while he flaunted his wealth. But the worst part wasn't how cruel he was to me. It was how he used Ruby. 2 days after seeing Mr. Henderson, I was in the kitchen making a simple pasta dinner. Pasta was cheap, when Preston walked in carrying a massive, beautifully wrapped box. "Ruby," he called out, his voice booming with fake cheer. "Daddy's home." Ruby came running into the kitchen. "Daddy!" He dropped the box onto the table, right over the placemats I had set out. "Open it, princess." Ruby tore away the paper. It was the Mars Mission Lego robotics set, the one that cost nearly $400. The one she had been begging for, but I had told her we had to save for Christmas. "Wow!" Ruby's eyes went wide. "The big one. Thank you, Daddy." Preston hugged her, looking straight at me over her shoulder. His eyes were cold, dead. "See, Ruby," he said, loud enough for me to hear. "Daddy can buy you whatever you want. Mommy can't buy you things like this, can she? Mommy doesn't have a job." My hand tightened around the wooden spoon until my fingers ached. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the boiling water at him, but Henderson's voice echoed in my mind. Let him think he's won. "That's very generous of Daddy," I said, forcing a smile that felt like broken glass. "Why don't you take it into the living room to play, sweetie?" "Wait," Preston said. "I got you something else, too." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a sleek white box. An iPad Pro, the latest model. "That old tablet of yours is a piece of junk," Preston said. "Throw it away. This one has a better camera, faster games, everything. And I set up a special account just for you." Ruby gasped. "A new iPad, really?" "Really. Because when you come live with me at my new apartment, we're only going to have the best things. No broken toys, no boring rules." Ruby looked at him, then at me. She could feel the tension. Children always can. She took the iPad slowly. "Thank you, Daddy." "Go on, go set it up," he urged. Ruby ran off to the living room with her treasures. Preston turned to me, his smile vanishing instantly. "Don't bother setting a plate for me," he sneered. "I'm eating out. The food around here has been pathetic lately." "Going to a business meeting?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "Or a therapy session?" He narrowed his eyes. "Watch your step, Meredith. You're walking on very thin ice." He grabbed his keys and left. I stood in the kitchen trembling. He was buying her loyalty. He was dazzling a 7-year-old with consumerism to erase her mother. Later that night, I went to check on Ruby. The house was quiet. I pushed her bedroom door open slightly. The glow of the nightlight illuminated her bed. I expected to see her playing with her new iPad, but she wasn't. The shiny new box sat on her desk, unopened. Ruby was curled up under her duvet, fast asleep, but one of her hands was tucked under her pillow. I tiptoed closer. I gently lifted the corner of the pillow. My heart broke. She was clutching her old, battered tablet. The screen was shattered from last summer, cracked in a spiderweb pattern. The case was peeling. Why was she holding onto this piece of junk when a $2,000 brand new device sat on her desk? Was it comfort? Familiarity? I reached down to gently remove it so she wouldn't sleep on the hard glass. Ruby stirred. Her hand instantly tightened around the old tablet, pulling it deeper under the covers. "No," she mumbled in her sleep. "Mine." I drew my hand back. "It's okay, baby. It's Mommy. Sleep." She settled back down, but her grip didn't loosen. I kissed her forehead and left the room, my mind spinning with questions. Ruby loved new gadgets. Why was she rejecting the new iPad? I chalked it up to the stress of the divorce. Maybe she felt accepting the new gift was a betrayal of me. The thought made me want to cry. I was dragging my daughter into a war she didn't understand. But I was wrong. Ruby understood far more than I did. That old broken tablet wasn't just a toy, It was a weapon. I just didn't know it yet. The following Friday, Mr. Henderson called me with urgent instructions. "I need you out of the house for a few hours tonight," he said. "I've got a private investigator watching the property. We suspect he's going to bring her there while he thinks you're away." "You want me to leave them alone in my house?" I felt a wave of nausea. "We need proof of infidelity within the marital home. It bypasses certain clauses in the prenup he's trying to enforce. Go to a movie. Go for a drive. Just don't be there between 7 and 10 p.m. "What about Ruby? He thinks Ruby is at a sleepover, right?" "You told me she was going to her cousin's." "Yes," I said. "I dropped her off an hour ago." "Good, then go." I did as I was told. I sat in a dark theater watching a comedy I couldn't laugh at, checking my phone every 5 minutes. At 9:30 p.m., I drove back. I parked down the street, turned off my headlights, and waited for the all-clear text from the PI. But as I sat there, my phone buzzed. It wasn't the PI. It was my sister calling from her landline. "Meredith?" She sounded panicked. "Did you pick Ruby up?" "What? No. Isn't she at your house?" "She's not," my sister said. "We were playing hide-and-seek in the backyard. I went inside to get some juice, and when I came out, she was gone. Her backpack is gone, too. I thought maybe you came by and grabbed her early." Ice water surged through my veins. I didn't grab her. Oh my God. I'm looking everywhere. "Meredith, I'm calling the neighbors." I hung up and started the car. A raw, blind panic took over. Where would she go? She was 7 years old. And then it hit me. Ruby had been acting strange about protecting her things. She had been worried about her Legos. She walked home. My sister's house was only 4 blocks from mine, connected by a wooded path Ruby knew well. I sped toward my house. If Ruby walked home and Preston was there with her, I pulled into the driveway. Preston's car was there, and another car, a sleek silver Mercedes convertible. Her car. I didn't wait for the PI. I ran to the front door. It was locked. I fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking so badly I dropped them. Inside the house, the scene was calm. Too calm. Soft jazz was playing. I smelled that sandalwood perfume again, heavy and cloying. "Preston!" I screamed, bursting into the foyer. Preston appeared at the top of the stairs wearing a silk robe. His face went pale when he saw me. "Meredith, you weren't supposed to be back until midnight." "Where is she?" I shouted, running past him. "Where is Ruby?" "Ruby, isn't she at your sister's?" "She ran away. She's not there." Just then, the living room closet door creaked open. We both froze. Ruby stepped out. She was still wearing her coat, her backpack on her shoulders. She looked terrified, her eyes darting between me and her father. "Ruby!" I dropped to my knees, pulling her into my arms. "Oh my God, you scared Mommy to death. Why did you leave your aunt's house?" I forgot my tablet," she whispered, clutching her backpack straps. "The old one. I needed it." Preston walked down the stairs, his eyes narrowing. "You walked home alone in the dark for a piece of junk?" Just then, a voice drifted from the kitchen. A woman's voice, smooth, confident, and annoyed. "Preston? Honey, is that the wife back early? We haven't finished our wine yet." Bianca Sterling stepped into the hallway. I looked up. It was the first time I had seen her in person. She was stunning. Tall, blonde, wearing a cashmere dress that probably cost more than my car, but her eyes were chips of ice. There was a calculating glint in them as she looked at me, then down at Ruby. "So this is the child," Bianca said, looking at Ruby like a specimen in a jar. "She looks unkempt." "Get out," I growled, standing up, putting my body between Bianca and Ruby. "Get out of my house." Preston stepped between us. "This is my house, Meredith. Bianca is my guest. And you?" He glared at Ruby. "You are in big trouble, young lady. Sneaking around, spying on us?" "I wasn't spying," Ruby cried, her voice shrinking. "I just wanted my tablet." "Go to your room," Preston ordered. "Now." Ruby ran upstairs crying. I turned to Preston and Bianca. I was shaking with rage. "You brought her here, into our daughter's home, while you thought she was away. You are disgusting." Bianca laughed softly. She stepped toward me, invading my space. She smelled expensive and toxic. "Don't be dramatic, Meredith," she said. Her voice was the one from the nightmares. "I'm just inspecting my future home. It needs a major overhaul. This decor is very 2010. She smirked and turned to Preston. "Call me when you've handled the help, darling." She walked out the front door. I looked at Preston. He didn't look ashamed. He just looked annoyed that his evening had been ruined. "You're going to lose her, Preston," I whispered. "You're going to lose Ruby." "I'm not losing anything," he hissed. "And you just proved you can't even watch your child for a single evening. Negligence. Add it to the file." He stormed upstairs. I collapsed onto the stairs, burying my face in my hands. He was twisting everything. Even Ruby running away because she was homesick was being twisted into my negligence. I didn't know then that Ruby hadn't just come back for her tablet. She hadn't just been hiding in that closet either. She had been there for 10 minutes before we arrived, long enough to see things, long enough to hear things. A week before the trial, Mr. Henderson called me into his office. The air in the room was heavy. A thick document sat on his desk. "It's here," he said gravely. "The psychological evaluation." My heart sank. "But I never saw a psychologist. How is there an evaluation?" "That's what I said. But Dr. Sterling is creative." He slid the report across the desk. The cover page read, "Evaluation of Psychological Capacity, Meredith Miller. Prepared by Dr. Bianca Sterling, licensed clinical psychologist." I opened it. My hands shook as I read the first paragraph. The subject exhibits classic symptoms of borderline personality disorder, characterized by severe emotional instability, erratic behavior, and an inability to prioritize the safety of her child. "This is a lie," I whispered. "Borderline? I've never been diagnosed with anything." "Keep reading," Henderson said. I turned the page. It was a list of observed incidents. Incident 1. Subject was observed at the downtown mall violently grabbing the child's arm and screaming aggressively. The child appeared terrified and was crying. "That was the escalator," I cried out. "She tripped. I caught her. She was crying because she scraped her knee." Incident 2. Subject was observed at the park looking disoriented and manic, crying uncontrollably while the child played nearby unattended. "That was the day my mother passed away," I said, my voice cracking as tears streamed down my face. "I got the call while I was at the park. I sat on that bench and cried for 10 minutes. Ruby was playing in the sandbox just 5 feet away. I wasn't having an episode. I was grieving." "She's twisting everything," Henderson said, slamming his hand onto the desk. "She's taking real moments from your life and rewriting the context to make you look completely unstable. It's calculated manipulation." "But how does she even know about these things?" I asked. "She wasn't there." "Preston," Henderson replied. "Preston told her. Or," he paused, his expression darkening, "or she's been following you." A cold chill ran straight through me. The woman I had seen in our hallway, the one who looked at my daughter like she was an inconvenience, had been actively watching us. "There's more," Henderson said, turning the pages. "Look at the recommendation." I flipped to the final page. Conclusion. "It is my professional opinion that Meredith Miller poses a significant psychological risk to the development of Ruby Miller. I strongly recommend that full legal and physical custody be awarded to the father, Preston Miller, with the mother receiving only supervised visitation pending psychiatric intervention." "Supervised visitation?" The words choked me. I felt like a criminal. "I won't even be allowed to be alone with my own daughter." "That is exactly what they want," Henderson said. "They want to erase you, Meredith. If the judge believes this report, and Dr. Sterling has a lot of credentials behind her name, you lose." "Can't we prove she's biased?" I asked desperately. "They are together. She's his mistress. We know this." Henderson sighed, rubbing his temples. "Proving that in family court is incredibly difficult without concrete financial evidence or photographic proof of their indiscretions. Otherwise, it's just your word against a respected professional. And right now, your word is being labeled as unstable." I stared at the signature at the bottom of the page. Bianca Sterling. The sharp loops of her handwriting looked like barbed wire. "She isn't just an expert," I said, my voice turning to stone. "She's trying to destroy me." "We have one real opportunity left," Henderson said. "Cross-examination. I have to break her down on the witness stand. I have to expose the truth. But you must remain completely stoic, Meredith. Preston's lawyer, Vance, is going to use this report to provoke you in court. He'll say terrible things to get a reaction, to make you yell or cry. If you lose your composure for even a second, you prove Dr. Sterling right." "I won't break," I said, even as the tears kept falling. "You have to be flawless," Henderson warned, "because if you fall apart, Ruby is going to Zurich." I drove home in a complete daze, the world closing in on me. I looked at the empty passenger seat where Ruby usually sat, her car seat looking so small and abandoned. Switzerland. They were planning to take my baby to another continent. When I got back, I walked into the kitchen and found Preston casually sipping wine. He looked at my tear-stained face and smirked. "Read the report?" he asked. I didn't answer. I just tried to walk past him. "She's thorough, isn't she?" he called out behind me. "Bianca really captured the real you." I stopped in my tracks and turned around slowly. "You are going to face the consequences for this, Preston," I said calmly. Maybe, he laughed, but I'll have the house, the money, and our daughter. And you'll just be a distant memory. I went to my room, locked the door, and pulled out my old drafting compass. I held the sharp metal tip in my hand, using the physical sensation to keep myself grounded. I cannot break, I told myself. I cannot break. But I had no idea that in that courtroom the next day, they had a trap prepared for me, and I was about to walk right into it. Reading that psychological report shifted something deep inside me. The fear evaporated, replaced by a cold, calculating anger. If Dr. Bianca Sterling wanted to rewrite my life story, I needed to find out exactly who was funding her narrative. The breakthrough came from the most innocent source. The next evening, I was giving Ruby a bath, one of the few moments Preston couldn't interrupt. As I rinsed her hair, she splashed around with her rubber ducks. "Mommy," she said, wiping bubbles from her nose, "why does Auntie B always smell like fancy wood?" My hands froze in her curls. "Auntie B?" "Yeah, the lady Daddy always talks to. Even when she's not here, Daddy smells like her, like that candle shop at the mall, but stronger." Santal 33. Sandalwood and cedar. That was the scent on Preston's shirts. That was the fragrance that lingered in the hallway the night Ruby ran back home. "Does Auntie B come over a lot when I'm not here?" I asked, keeping my voice entirely casual. Ruby nodded. "Sometimes. Daddy says she's helping him with work, but they don't look like they're working. They drink wine, laugh a lot, and she sits on his lap." A wave of nausea hit me. He had brought her into our home, into the space I had built for 15 years. That night, after tucking Ruby in, I opened my laptop. I didn't have the funds for a private investigator, but I had something better. The relentless determination of a woman fighting for her child. I searched Dr. Bianca Sterling again. Her professional website was immaculate, showcasing an Ivy League education and expertise in corporate psychology and high-conflict family dynamics. But everyone leaves a digital trail. Her personal social media accounts were locked down, but then I remembered Sarah, Preston's former assistant. She had mentioned Bianca was a corporate consultant. I searched the firm's tagged photos, and there it was. A group photo from the company holiday party the previous year. I hadn't been invited. Preston told me it was strictly for employees, but in the background of a selfie posted by a junior analyst, there were Preston and Bianca. She was wearing a stunning red dress, her hand placed possessively on his chest. The look they shared was anything but professional. I clicked on the tag for her dress, which led to a public fashion and lifestyle account she ran on the side under a pseudonym. I scrolled down, my heart hammering against my ribs. October 12th. A photo of a diamond bracelet on a slender wrist. The caption read, "From my favorite client. He knows exactly how to show appreciation." I checked my records. October 12th. Tiffany & Co., $4,500. November 5th. A selfie in a luxury bathrobe holding a champagne glass. The location tag, The Four Seasons, Chicago. My bill, The Four Seasons, $2,800. December 20th. A photo of a brand new designer handbag. The caption, "Securing the bag. Next year is going to be unforgettable." My bill. Saks Fifth Avenue, $1,200. She wasn't just his mistress. She was living a life of absolute luxury funded directly by my daughter's college savings. She was wearing my financial security on her wrist. I screenshotted every single post, matching every caption to the exact dates on the bank statements. But the most chilling post was from just 3 days prior. It was a photo of a passport and a flight ticket. The destination was covered, but the caption read, "New life loading. Just one final hurdle to clear before paradise." That hurdle was me. I realized then that Preston didn't just want to win a divorce. He wanted to completely erase me so they could disappear with the money and my daughter. I printed out the photos. The ink was running low, creating dark lines across Bianca's face that made her look like the villain she truly was. I placed them into a folder labeled Evidence. She thought she was the hunter, completely untouchable. She didn't realize that by flaunting her lifestyle online, she had just handed me the exact proof I needed to fight back. Mediation was supposed to be a civilized way to resolve a dispute. But when you are dealing with an absolute narcissist, there is no room for civility. It is purely psychological warfare. We met in a conference room at the courthouse, centered around a long table polished to a mirror shine. On one side sat Preston and his aggressive attorney, Mr. Vance. On the other side sat Mr. Henderson and me. In his worn cardigan, Henderson looked like an unassuming history professor next to Vance's sharp, expensive suit. But sitting next to him, I felt safer than I ever did around Preston. The mediator, a tired-looking woman named Brenda, opened her file. "Our goal today is to find common ground." "There is no common ground," Vance interrupted smoothly. "Our position is clear. Mr. Miller is the sole financial provider. Mrs. Miller has been unemployed for 15 years. Furthermore, given Mrs. Miller's recent emotional instability, we believe full custody is the only safe option for the child. We completely reject that narrative, Mr. Henderson countered, his voice gravelly. Mrs. Miller raised that child while your client was busy working in hotel rooms in Chicago. Preston laughed, leaning back in his chair and spinning a pen. Do you really want to do this, Meredith? Do you want to drag this out? Look at you. You're wearing a coat from 3 years ago. You had to sell your grandmother's jewelry just to pay this old man. It's pathetic. Preston, I said, my voice trembling but firm, I don't care about the money. Keep the cars. Keep the stocks. Just give me joint custody. Let me be Ruby's mother. Preston stopped spinning the pen. He leaned forward, his eyes completely lifeless. No. Why? I pleaded. She's my daughter. Because you are an unstable influence, Preston said. You're weak. You're emotional. Ruby needs a parent who models success. And frankly, Meredith, I'm moving. The air left my lungs. Moving? Where? Preston smirked. Zurich, Switzerland. My firm is transferring me, and since I will have full custody, Ruby is coming with me. We leave the day after the verdict. You can't do that. I stood up abruptly, knocking my chair backward. You can't take her to another country. I'll never see her. You'll have visitation, Vance said dismissively. Once a year, supervised. If you can afford the plane ticket, though let's be honest, you won't be able to. This is tearing her away from everything she knows, I cried. It's a perfectly legal relocation, Preston whispered, lowering his voice so only I could hear. And there is absolutely nothing you can do to stop it. Sign the papers, Meredith. If you sign now, I'll give you enough cash to get a decent apartment. If you fight me next week in court, I will leave you with nothing. And Ruby will grow up in Europe forgetting she ever had a mother named Meredith. I looked at him, at the man I had shared a life with for 15 years, and realized there was no humanity left in him. He was just a machine driven by greed and ego. Mr. Henderson placed a hand on my arm. Sit down, Meredith. I am not signing, I said, looking Preston dead in the eye. I would rather fight this with nothing than give up on my daughter. Preston checked his Rolex. Suit yourself. See you in court. Try to dress well. I'd hate for you to look as desperate as you sound on the record. He stood up and walked out, Vance following closely behind. I sank into my chair. Switzerland, Mr. Henderson? Can he really do that if he gets custody? Yes, Henderson said grimly. He has the means to expedite a passport, and he has legitimate relocation paperwork from his employer. It looks justified on paper. So if I lose next week, I lose her forever. Then we make sure we don't lose, Henderson said. But for the first time, I saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes. I walked out of that building carrying the weight of the world. Switzerland. It felt like a ticking clock. I had exactly 7 days to stop a millionaire, a ruthless lawyer, and a corrupt psychologist from taking my child away forever. The courtroom was freezing. I couldn't tell if it was the air conditioning or just the sheer terror running through my veins, but I couldn't stop shivering. The first day of the trial began with a coordinated attack on my character. The gallery was surprisingly full. Preston was a prominent figure in the local financial scene, and the rumors of a contentious divorce had drawn curious onlookers. I recognized a few women I used to play tennis with, people who had stopped returning my calls months ago. They whispered behind their hands, watching my simple black dress and tired eyes. Preston's attorney, Mr. Vance, stood up, looking entirely at ease. Your Honor, Vance began, his voice echoing through the room. We are here today to protect a child, to protect Ruby Miller from a deeply unstable environment created by a mother who has lost her grounding. He didn't waste any time. He called his first witness, our housekeeper, Maria. My heart dropped. Maria had been with us for 5 years. I treated her like family, using my own allowance to give her bonuses. Now she sat on the stand, refusing to look at me. Maria, Vance said gently, please describe the state of the Miller household over the last 6 months. It was very chaotic, Saga, Maria murmured, looking down at her lap. Mrs. Miller stopped maintaining the home. Dishes were left out, laundry piled up. She would stay in bed until noon. Objection, Henderson protested. Lacks context. Mrs. Miller was suffering from a severe case of the flu during that time. Overruled, the judge said, typing notes. The witness is simply describing her observations. Did Mrs. Miller ever fail to pick up her daughter from school? Vance asked. Yes, Maria whispered. Once, last month. I was in the emergency room, I frantically whispered to Henderson. I had a migraine so blinding I couldn't see to drive. I called the school ahead of time. Shh, Henderson hissed. Let them finish. Next came a forensic accountant hired by Preston. He projected charts onto the screen. As you can see, Your Honor, Mrs. Miller's spending habits became completely erratic. Thousands of dollars were withdrawn in cash with absolutely no receipts. This pattern often suggests hidden debts or unmonitored spending problems. My jaw dropped. Those were the exact cash withdrawals Preston had forced me to make after he shut off my credit cards. He told me to use cash for the groceries, but to the judge, it just looked like unexplained numbers on a screen, painting me as irresponsible and secretive. Preston sat at the plaintiff's table, wearing a perfect expression of sorrowful concern. Every time a new fact was introduced, he would shake his head sadly as if to say, "Look at what I've had to put up with." By the lunch break, I felt completely exposed. They had twisted my illness into laziness and my financial restriction into a liability. I sat on a bench in the hallway, picking at a stale sandwich Henderson had brought me. "They're winning," I said, my voice hollow. The judge looks at me with complete disapproval. "Did you see his face when they showed those photos of the kitchen?" "It's theater, Meredith," Henderson said, though he looked worried. "They are throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks." We fight back during cross-examination. We just have to wait for the main witness. "The main witness, Dr. Sterling?" Henderson nodded. "She's scheduled for tomorrow morning. She is the anchor of their case. If her testimony stands, the judge will grant full custody to Preston. If we can compromise her credibility, their entire case collapses." But how?" I asked. "Sarah won't testify. We only have Instagram screenshots. The judge might not even admit them into evidence." "I'm working on it," Henderson said, but he didn't sound completely confident. As we walked back into the courtroom, I saw Preston standing by the water cooler, laughing heartily with Vance. He caught my eye and gave me a deliberate, mocking wink. It was the look of a hunter who knew the target had nowhere left to run. I walked back to my seat, my legs feeling incredibly heavy. I looked at the empty witness stand. Tomorrow, the woman who was actively involved with my husband was going to sit there and tell the court I was unfit. And the terrifying truth was, after today, I was starting to fear that the court would actually believe her. The next morning, the heavy wooden doors swung open, and she stepped inside. A hush fell over the room. It wasn't just because she was the key expert witness. She carried an undeniable presence. Dr. Bianca Sterling looked immaculate. She wore a tailored cream skirt suit that looked professional yet incredibly expensive, her hair pulled back into a flawless bun. She carried her leather briefcase with absolute confidence. I stopped breathing. There she was. The woman from the hallway, the woman from the online photos. Watching her take the stand and swear to tell the truth on the Bible made my blood turn to ice. She settled into the witness chair, adjusting the microphone with a manicured hand. On her wrist, catching the light, was the diamond bracelet from Tiffany's, the one paid for with Ruby's college savings. "Dr. Sterling," Vance began respectfully, "please state your credentials for the court." "I hold a Ph.D. in clinical psychology from Yale," she said, her voice smooth and measured. "I have 15 years of experience specializing in high-conflict family dynamics and child development. I run Sterling Consulting, a firm dedicated to family wellness." "And you were retained to evaluate the Miller family?" "Yes, I was." "What were your findings regarding Mrs. Meredith Miller?" Bianca turned her head slightly. For a brief second, her eyes locked onto mine. There was no remorse, no hesitation, just a cold, predatory amusement. "My findings were deeply concerning," she said, turning back to the judge. "Mrs. Miller exhibits clear indicators of borderline personality disorder with significant narcissistic tendencies. She creates unstable environments to draw attention to herself and is emotionally volatile. During my observations, I noted a pattern of projecting her own anxieties onto the child, creating an unhealthy dependency." "Can you provide a specific example?" "Certainly. I observed an incident at a local park where Mrs. Miller was weeping uncontrollably on a bench, completely unmindful of her daughter walking toward the perimeter. It wasn't until an observer intervened that Mrs. Miller reacted, and her reaction was defensive toward the bystander rather than focused on the child." "That is a complete lie," I yelled before I could stop myself. "That never happened. I was crying because I had just learned my mother passed away." "Silence," the judge barked, slamming his gavel. "Mrs. Miller, one more outburst, and I will have you removed from this courtroom." "You see, Your Honor," Bianca said softly, nodding with a sympathetic expression. "A clear lack of impulse control and emotional outbursts. This is exactly what the child is exposed to daily." I pressed my hand over my mouth, realizing I had just walked right into her trap. As she continued her testimony, a familiar scent drifted through the air. The courtroom ventilation must have kicked on, carrying the fragrance from the witness stand directly toward our table. Sandalwood, cedar, and jasmine. It was unmistakable. It was the exact scent from Preston's clothes. the scent of the betrayal that had dismantled my marriage. I grabbed Henderson's arm. "It's her," I hissed. "The perfume. It's the exact same. She's standing there lying under oath, Henderson, and she's wearing the bracelet he bought her. Look at her wrist." Henderson narrowed his eyes. "We can't prove who bought the bracelet right now, Meredith. But we know." I felt like I was losing my grip on the situation. She's evaluating my fitness as a parent while actively involved with the plaintiff. It's completely corrupt. "I know," Henderson whispered. "Zaida Zhongyanli, the judge sees a Yale PhD who is calm and professional, and he sees you reacting emotionally." Vance finished his questioning with a satisfied smile. "Thank you, Dr. Sterling. Your insights have been incredibly clarifying." "Your witness," the judge said to Henderson. Henderson stood up slowly, his shoulders slightly hunched. He walked toward the stand with a measured pace. "Dr. Sterling," he began, his voice gravelly, "you state that you observed Mrs. Miller. Did you ever conduct a formal, in-person interview with her?" "I attempted to," Bianca replied smoothly, "but Mrs. Miller was uncooperative and combative. Therefore, I relied on behavioral observations, which is standard practice when a subject is resistant." "Resistant," Henderson noted dryly, "or perhaps unaware. Did you ever disclose to Mrs. Miller that she was being evaluated?" "That would alter the natural behavior," Bianca smiled. "Observation in a natural state is key." "And what about your relationship with Mr. Miller?" Henderson asked sharply. "Is it strictly professional?" The room went dead silent. Preston stiffened in his chair. Bianca didn't even blink. "Mr. Miller retained my firm. Ours is a professional consultant-client relationship. Nothing more, nothing less." Henderson pulled out the printed black and white copy of the holiday party photo. "Because this photo from a company event seems to show a rather close professional relationship." Bianca glanced at the photo and let out a soft, clear laugh. "Oh, counselor, that was a holiday party? Everyone was celebrating. If standing next to a client is an issue, then half the people in this room are compromised." The judge looked at the photo briefly. It was dark, blurry, and ambiguous. "Mr. Henderson," the judge warned, "unless you have actual proof of an inappropriate conflict of interest, move on. Let's not spend the court's time on speculation." Henderson looked disappointed. He lowered the photo. "No further questions." I sank into my chair. She had managed to navigate right through it, lying under oath with absolute confidence. The defense calls Meredith Miller to the stand. Hearing my name felt like a weight dropping on my chest. I stood up, my legs trembling so much I had to steady myself against the table. I walked to the stand and took the oath, the irony of swearing to tell the truth in a room full of deception weighing heavily on me. Mr. Henderson started with gentle questions. I tried to explain the bank accounts, the drained savings, my mother's passing, and my illness. I focused on speaking clearly, trying to bring out the logical, precise architect I used to be. But then it was Vance's turn. He didn't stay behind the podium. He walked right up to the witness stand, invading my space just like Preston always did. "Mrs. Miller," he began, his voice dripping with false politeness, "you claim to be a dedicated provider for your daughter, yet you have no income, no savings, and rely completely on your husband's resources. Is that correct?" "Our marriage was a partnership," I said, keeping my voice tightly controlled. "I managed our home and raised our daughter." "Managed?" Vance raised an eyebrow. "We saw the photos of the household. Is that your definition of management?" "I was severely ill." "Excuses," Vance cut in sharply. "Always excuses. Let's talk about Ruby. Your husband notes that you create an anxious environment for her, telling her she can't trust her father. That is a complete fabrication. I want her to have a relationship with her father, but he's attempting to buy her affection with lavish gifts. Or perhaps," Vance leaned in closer, "he is providing for her while you are simply present, a dependent resource." I gripped the wooden railing. "I am her mother. Are you?" Vance turned toward the gallery, then back to me. "Your husband is a highly successful executive. Dr. Sterling is an accomplished professional. They represent stability. And you, Meredith, look at you. You're simply bitter because you haven't kept pace." "I stepped away from my career to support his." "You stepped away because you couldn't handle the pressure," Vance said coldly. "Preston told me himself. He said you were a mediocre architect at best, and he supported you out of obligation." It was a lie. I knew it was a lie. I had graduated at the top of my class. But hearing those words, realizing Preston had ridiculed my life's work to his lawyer, to Bianca, to everyone, shattered something deep inside me. "That is not true." I raised my voice, the emotion breaking through. "And now," Vance continued, ignoring my protest, "you want to limit Ruby's opportunities. You want to keep her here in a limited environment instead of allowing her to thrive in Zurich. She is 7 years old, I yelled, tears spilling over. She needs her mother. She needs stability. Stability? Vance countered loudly, his face inches from mine. Not from someone who reacts like this. Not from someone who unravels under pressure. Look at this. He slammed a large photograph onto the railing in front of me. It was a photo of me in our bedroom. My hair was wild, my eyes swollen from crying, my mouth open in a look of pure distress. It had been taken the night Preston told me he was leaving, the night he had cornered me in the hallway. The night I thought my entire life was over. I hadn't been unstable. I had been completely heartbroken. But in that frozen image, out of context, I looked entirely unhinged. Is this the face of a stable parent? Vance shouted to the courtroom. Is this who should be providing a calm environment for a child? That was taken after he completely upended our lives. I stood up, crying openly. He provoked me. He laughed while I was in despair. He is the one destroying this family. Can't anyone see what he's doing? He's taking everything from me. I pointed directly at Preston, my hand shaking uncontrollably as I sobbed. Your Honor, Vance turned to the judge, spreading his arms wide. The defense rests its character assessment. The witness has perfectly demonstrated the exact instability documented in Dr. Sterling's report. I froze, looking up at the judge. He wasn't looking at the photograph. He was looking at me, and in his expression, I saw a mix of pity and dismissal. I glanced over at Preston. He was covering his mouth with his hand, looking down at the table as if he were embarrassed for me. But I knew better. I knew he was hiding a triumphant smile. Order, the judge said quietly. Witness, please take your seat and compose yourself. I sank back into the chair, all the fight completely draining out of me. I had done exactly what they wanted me to do. I had reacted emotionally. I had cried. I had given them the exact footage they needed to validate their claims. Court is adjourned until tomorrow morning for final arguments and the verdict, the judge announced. Bailiffs, clear the room. I walked back to Mr. Henderson. He didn't say a word. He just slowly gathered his papers into his briefcase. It's over, isn't it? I whispered. We need a miracle, Meredith, he said softly. An absolute miracle. That night, the house felt completely empty. Preston didn't come home, likely celebrating his impending victory with Bianca. I walked into Ruby's room. She was sitting on the floor, surrounded by her stuffed animals, and looked up at me with wide, anxious eyes. Mommy. Hey, sweetie. I sat down next to her, trying to force a reassuring smile that I knew didn't reach my eyes. Are we going to court tomorrow? She asked. I am, I said, gently smoothing her hair. You're going to school, and Aunt Sarah is going to pick you up afterward. Is Daddy going to win? The question hung heavily in the air. I couldn't lie to her. I had never lied to her. I don't know, Ruby. Daddy has a lot of resources on his side. If he wins, do I have to go to Switzerland? She asked, struggling slightly with the pronunciation. Switzerland, I corrected softly, my heart breaking into a million pieces. If the judge decides that's best, yes. But Daddy cares about you, and he wants you to see the world. But I don't want to see the world, Ruby whispered, tears rolling down her cheeks. I want to stay with you. I pulled her tightly into a hug, burying my face in her shoulder, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. It felt like it might be the last time I could hold her like this. Tomorrow, her future would be decided by a stranger or handed over to Preston. Tomorrow, I might just be a visitor in her life. Listen to me, Ruby, I said, pulling back slightly to look her in the eyes. No matter what happens tomorrow, and no matter where you go, you are the absolute best thing that ever happened to me. You are smart, you are kind, and you are incredibly strong. Do you understand me? You are so much stronger than you think. Ruby sniffled, looking over at her backpack resting by the door. I know, Mommy, she said, her voice sounding surprisingly firm. Grown-ups think kids don't notice anything, but we do. What do you mean? She didn't answer. She just walked over to her backpack and checked the front pocket. I could see the corner of her old, cracked tablet peeking out. Ruby, why are you bringing that old thing to school? The glass is shattered. You might get a scratch. It's taped up, she said defensively. I need it for show and tell. Show and tell isn't until Friday, sweetie. It's for a special project, she said evasively. I was too exhausted to press the issue. If holding onto a familiar toy gave her comfort, I wasn't going to take it away. I tucked her into bed and stayed until her breathing slowed into sleep, memorizing the silhouette of her face. I went back to my room but couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, watching the moonlight look down on the suburban neighborhood that had become both my home and my confinement, feeling a profound emptiness. I thought about all the women who had faced similar battles, outmatched by wealth and a complete lack of scruples, and felt their collective struggle mirroring my own. I'd like to invite you to pause with me for a brief moment. Sitting in that dark room, my chest felt completely tightened by the weight of it all. I know that out there, someone listening to this story might recognize that exact feeling of helplessness. If you are still matching this journey with me, please take a second to like this video and drop a number 1 in the comments below. It tells me you're here, and it reminds me that we aren't alone in facing these challenges. Your support is the quiet strength that keeps the story moving forward. Leave a 1, and let's see how the truth finally found its way out. The final day of the trial had arrived. The courtroom was packed to capacity. Preston had brought his parents, who sat in the front row, looking over at me with cold indifference. Bianca was there too, sitting right behind Preston in a modest blue dress, perfectly playing the role of a supportive professional consultant. The judge entered, and we all stood. "Please be seated," he said, his expression solemn as he organized his notes. "I have thoroughly reviewed the arguments presented. I have examined the assessment provided by our expert witness, Dr. Sterling, and I have looked over the financial records." He took off his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "This is a challenging matter. However, the court's primary obligation is to ensure the absolute stability and long-term well-being of the minor child. The documentation regarding Mrs. Miller's emotional volatility is substantial." My heart stopped. He was about to deliver the final ruling. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "Mr. Miller has presented a comprehensive relocation plan that offers significant educational advantages abroad. Therefore, it is the decision of this court." Creak. The heavy double doors at the back of the courtroom groaned open. In the absolute silence of the room, the sound was incredibly loud. Every head turned. A bailiff stood there looking entirely confused, and slipping right past his arm was a small figure in a pink winter coat. Ruby, my sister, who was supposed to keep her at school, came running in behind her looking completely panicked. "Ruby, stop! You can't go in there." "Ruby," I gasped, half rising from my seat. Preston stood up immediately. "What is going on here? Why is my daughter in this room? Get her out of here." "This is a closed proceeding," Vance argued loudly. But Ruby didn't stop. She walked right down the center aisle. In that massive room, she looked tiny, but her posture was entirely resolute. She didn't look at me, and she didn't look at Preston. She kept her eyes locked directly on the judge. "Young lady," the judge said, his voice stern but laced with surprise, "you cannot be in here right now." Ruby stopped right at the wooden partition separating the gallery from the court. She gripped the rail tightly. "Are you the person in charge?" Ruby asked, her voice trembling but remarkably clear. The judge blinked. I am the judge, yes." "My daddy said you were going to make me leave," Ruby said. "He said you were going to force me to go live with him and Auntie B." "Ruby, stop this right now," Preston yelled, his face turning bright red. "Sarah, get her out of this room." "No." Ruby turned to face her father, raising her voice. "I'm not going. You're lying." A collective gasp rippled through the gallery. "Young lady," the judge said firmly, "we do not raise our voices in this courtroom." Ruby turned back to the judge, reaching into her backpack. My heart was pounding frantically. Was she pulling out a toy? A drawing? She pulled out her old, cracked tablet, the one with the clear tape across the screen. "Daddy told everyone Mommy is unstable," Ruby said, tears finally starting to trace down her face. "Daddy said Mommy is bad. But Daddy is lying, and Auntie B is lying too. I have the proof." Proof. The judge leaned forward. "Ruby, please lower the device." Preston stepped toward the gate, but a bailiff immediately blocked his path. "Please remain seated, Mr. Miller," the bailiff ordered. "Your Honor, this is completely out of order," Vance stammered defensively. "This is a child. She is clearly being coached by her mother." "I am not being coached," Ruby shouted. "Mommy didn't even know. Mommy thought it was broken." She held the tablet up like a shield. "Can I please just show you?" Ruby asked the judge. "Please, before you make me leave." The judge looked at Preston, who was visibly sweating. He looked at me sitting there in absolute shock, and then he looked at the little girl holding a piece of fractured glass and plastic. "Bailiff," the judge said slowly, "secure the device from the child. Connect it directly to the courtroom display." "Objection," Vance projected. "We have absolutely no verification for the source of this digital material." "Overruled," the judge said, narrowing his eyes. "This involves the immediate welfare of a minor. I want to see exactly what she deems so critical." The room was absolutely dead silent. The bailiff took the tablet, stepped over to the AV desk, and plugged in a cable. The large monitor on the wall flickered to life. Preston sank into his chair, burying his face in his hands. Then the video began to play. The screen went black for a second, and then an image appeared. It was a low-angle shot filmed from floor level, partially obscured by green leaves. It was the exact viewpoint from behind the large ficus tree in our living room. The timestamp in the corner read, November 12th, 8:45 p.m. The night I had been out at the movies, the night Ruby had walked back from her aunt's house. Preston walked into the frame, wearing his silk robe and holding a glass of red wine. God, she's pathetic. Preston's voice came through the courtroom speakers with absolute clarity. Did you see her face when I told her I was taking our daughter? Another figure stepped into the frame. Bianca. She wasn't wearing her professional suit. She was wearing a silk robe, the exact one Preston had bought me for our anniversary 3 years ago. You're being too hard on her, darling, Bianca purred, taking the wine glass from his hand with a laugh. Just kidding. She's an absolute pushover. Honestly, I don't know how you lasted 15 years with her. She's completely uninspiring. I stayed for the professional image, Preston said, pulling Bianca down onto his lap on the sofa. But maintaining that image is getting expensive. Now that the assets have been repositioned, I don't need it anymore. An audible gasp echoed through the courtroom. I covered my mouth, tears flowing freely now. Watching them, hearing them, it was 1,000 times worse than anything I had imagined. On screen, Bianca leaned in. Are you absolutely certain the funds in the Cayman account cleared? I tried to authorize the contractors in Zurich, but it showed as pending. It cleared this morning, Preston confirmed. $2 million, completely untraceable. Meredith will get half the equity in the house, which isn't much after the remaining mortgage. Meanwhile, I leave with the capital and our daughter. Bianca traced her fingers along his jaw. Do we absolutely have to take her with us? She's a handful, Preston. She always watches me closely. We have to take her, Preston answered. If I leave her with Meredith, the court could order substantial support payments, massive amounts. If I have full custody, I don't pay a single cent. Plus, it completely dismantles Meredith's position. It's the perfect resolution. You are ruthless, Bianca giggled. I love it. I'm not ruthless, Preston smirked. I'm just a winner. In the courtroom, Preston sat completely motionless, staring blankly at the table. Vance was frantically organizing his papers, looking desperate to distance himself from his client. But the video wasn't over yet. If you are feeling a surge of frustration watching this unravel, you are not alone. Let's see how justice finally handles this. The video continued, showing the two figures on the sofa, entirely unaware that a 7-year-old child was documenting everything from just 5 feet away. How is the psychological assessment coming along? Preston asked on screen. Is it ready? Bianca took a sip of her wine. Drafted this morning. If I do say so myself, it's an absolute masterpiece of fiction. Did you include the incident at the park? Oh, absolutely, Bianca said. I took the story you gave me about her crying when her mother passed away and framed it beautifully. Public volatility, endangering the minor. The judge will accept it completely. And the diagnosis? Borderline personality disorder, Bianca announced proudly. The perfect label for a difficult ex-wife. It accounts for the frustration, the tears, and the defensiveness. It makes every single thing she says sound like a symptom rather than a fact. You are brilliant, Preston said, kissing her. But what if the judge requests a secondary opinion? He won't, Bianca said confidently. My credentials carry weight. Plus, Vance is going to provoke her on the stand. Remember the plan? Use that photograph. The one I took when you cornered her. Right. Vance will present it, claim she's unraveling, and she'll react emotionally. Then, boom. Diagnosis confirmed. She'll validate everything right in front of the court. Preston laughed loudly as the video concluded with the sound of their glasses clinking together. The screen faded to black. For 3 long seconds, there was absolute silence in the courtroom. No one moved. The weight of the exposed truth hung heavily in the air. Preston Miller had just openly detailed fraud, theft, perjury, and conspiracy. Dr. Bianca Sterling had admitted to falsifying medical documentation and perjury. Then, complete chaos erupted. You set me up! Preston screamed, jumping to his feet and pointing directly at Bianca. You're the one who wrote the report. It was your entire plan. Me? Bianca shrieked, her calm demeanor shattering instantly. You told me she was unstable. You asked me to write it. You paid me. Sit down. The judge's voice boomed like thunder. He didn't even use his gavel. He stood up, his face flushed with an intense, righteous anger. Bailiffs, the judge ordered, pointing a shaking finger at the doors. Secure those doors. No one leaves this room. No one. The bailiffs moved instantly, blocking the double doors while 2 officers from the hallway stepped inside. The judge looked down at Preston and Bianca, his eyes blazing. In my 30 years on the bench, the judge said, his voice trembling with controlled fury, I have seen deception. I have seen dishonesty. But I have never, ever witnessed such a calculated, malicious mockery of this court. He turned his gaze to Vance. Counselor, were you aware of this arrangement? Vance stood up immediately, raising his hands in surrender. Your Honor, I had absolutely no knowledge. I relied entirely on the expert witness's documentation. I am immediately withdrawing as counsel of record. A wise choice, the judge spat, because you are fortunate not to be facing immediate administrative review yourself. He turned his focus to Bianca Sterling, who was shrinking into her seat, clutching her necklace. Dr. Sterling, you took an oath in my courtroom and submitted a fraudulent medical diagnosis to strip a mother of her child. Bianca stammered. It was a theoretical assessment. It is perjury. The judge slammed his hand on the desk. It is administrative fraud. And you, Mr. Miller, you admitted to concealing assets. You admitted to provoking your wife to misrepresent her character. The judge looked over at Ruby, who was still standing by the rail, looking anxious but incredibly brave. His expression softened instantly. Young lady, he said gently, thank you. You are the bravest person in this room. He turned back to the officers. Officers, place Mr. Miller and Miss Sterling into immediate custody. Charges include perjury, conspiracy to commit fraud, and contempt of court. Get the district attorney on the line. I want financial fraud charges added before the end of the day. What happened next felt like a scene from a movie, but the sense of relief was entirely real. The two officers walked over to the plaintiff's table. Preston tried to step back. Wait, he stammered, his arrogance completely gone, replaced by the desperate pleading of a cornered bully. That was just talk. We were drinking. You can't arrest me based on a casual video. I can, and I am, the judge said coldly. You admitted to hiding $2 million in a foreign account to evade a fair division of assets. That is a serious matter, Mr. Miller. The officer secured Preston's wrists behind his back. The distinct click of the handcuffs was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. Preston looked at me, his eyes wide with panic. Meredith, tell them. Tell them I care about Ruby. Think about our daughter. I stood up and looked him dead in the eye. A dedicated parent doesn't jeopardize their daughter's future to secure their own lifestyle, I said calmly. And a supportive husband doesn't try to convince his wife she's losing her mind. They led him away, and then it was Bianca's turn. She wasn't pleading. She was hysterical. This is a mistake. Do you know who I am? I have a PhD from Yale. You won't have a professional license by tomorrow, the judge noted dryly. Preston made me do it, she screamed as the officers escorted her out. He promised we'd be together. He promised me the resources. It looks like he misled you too, I said as she passed my table. She glared at me, her hair coming loose, looking exactly like the unhinged persona she had tried to project onto me. The courtroom doors opened, and a wave of whispers rippled through the gallery as the prominent executive and his strategist were escorted out in complete disgrace. The judge rapped his gavel to restore order. We are not finished, he said. We still have the matter of the divorce decree to finalize. He looked directly at me. Mrs. Miller, I owe you an apology. This court owes you an apology. We failed to see through this deception early on. Thank you, Your Honor, I whispered, holding Mr. Henderson's hand tightly. Henderson was beaming, looking years younger. Based on the evidence presented, the judge announced, I am issuing an immediate summary judgment. He didn't even need to consult his notes. He spoke with absolute certainty. First, he said, holding up a finger, I grant Meredith Miller an immediate divorce on the grounds of infidelity and extreme cruelty. Second, full legal and physical custody of Ruby Miller is awarded solely to her mother. All visitation rights for Mr. Miller are suspended indefinitely, pending a comprehensive independent psychological evaluation, a real one, and the conclusion of his criminal proceedings. I let out a sob of pure relief. Ruby ran through the gate and jumped straight into my arms. I held her tightly against me. She was mine. She was safe. No Switzerland, no Bianca. Third, the judge continued, I order an immediate freeze on all assets under the control of Preston Miller and Bianca Sterling, both domestic and international. The court will appoint a forensic accountant to recover the funds transferred overseas. All recovered assets will be awarded to Mrs. Miller as compensatory support and punitive damages. Fourth, the marital residence is awarded entirely to Mrs. Miller, free of any remaining mortgage obligations, which will be satisfied from Mr. Miller's remaining assets. Finally, the judge looked over at Vance, who looked completely invisible. Mr. Vance, you will report to the Ethics Committee tomorrow morning. If it turns out you had any knowledge of that falsified report, you will be answering for it as well. Yes, Your Honor, Vance murmured. Court is adjourned. The gavel struck, and it sounded like the sound of absolute freedom. Mr. Henderson embraced me. We did it, Meredith. Then he paused and pointed at Ruby. Or rather, she did it. I looked down at my daughter, who was holding her broken tablet like a hard-won trophy. "Did I do good, Mommy?" she asked. "You did amazing, sweetie," I cried, kissing her forehead. "You saved us." We walked out of the courthouse and into the bright winter sunshine. The air was crisp, but for the first time in months, I didn't feel the chill. I felt warm. I felt incredibly light. Preston and Bianca were already in the back of police cruisers down the street. I didn't even look back at them. They were my past. Ruby was my future. 6 months later, the atmosphere of silence had completely vanished from my life. Now my kitchen smelled of vanilla and fresh paint. I sold that large suburban house. I couldn't stay there with all the memories of that difficult time lingering in the halls. With the settlement funds, and yes, the forensic accountant managed to track down every single cent Preston tried to hide, I bought a beautiful sunlit farmhouse with a large garden. I also relaunched my design career. Meredith Miller Interior Design was officially open for business. My very first client, the judge's wife. Life has a wonderful way of coming full circle. Ruby thrived in her new environment, joining the robotics club at her new school. She rarely asked about her father, who was currently awaiting trial on multiple serious charges. Bianca had lost her license and was facing significant legal consequences of her own. One afternoon, Ruby and I were painting the walls of her new bedroom a bright, cheerful yellow. "Mom," Ruby said, dipping her brush, "can I ask you something?" "Anything, sweetie." "Why did you cry in court that day? When that lawyer was shouting at you?" I set my roller down and wiped my hands. "Because I was afraid, Ruby. I thought nobody was going to believe the truth." Ruby nodded thoughtfully. "That's why I made sure to take care of the tablet." "You know," I said, sitting next to her on the drop cloth, "I still don't completely understand how you knew to record them, or why you kept it a secret." Ruby smiled, a bright, knowing smile. "Remember that science kit you got me? The one about observations?" "I remember. It said a good scientist observes nature without disturbing it. If the subjects know you're watching, they change their behavior." I burst out laughing. "So, your dad and Bianca were the subjects?" "Exactly," Ruby said. "Daddy kept telling everyone you didn't notice things. He said, 'Mommy doesn't know what we're doing.' But I knew you weren't missing anything. You're the smartest person I know. You design houses in your mind." My eyes welled up with tears. "So," Ruby continued, "I knew if I told you about Bianca right away, it would just cause a big argument. And if there was an argument, Daddy would hide what he was doing. He'd be sneaky. So, I stayed quiet. I waited until I secured— what was that word Mr. Henderson used? The evidence. Right, the evidence. I waited until I had the evidence, and then I waited for the exact right moment to use it, like setting a proper trap. I stared at my 7-year-old daughter. She wasn't just bright, she possessed an incredible focus. Armed with a broken tablet and immense patience, she had completely outmaneuvered a millionaire executive and a corporate consultant. "You are absolutely incredible, Ruby Miller," I said, pulling her into a tight hug. "But next time, let's just talk to Mommy right away, okay? No more secret missions." "Okay," she giggled, "unless you get a boyfriend. Then I'm checking his background too." We both laughed, the sound echoing through our happy new home. I looked out the window at the garden. The winter frost had cleared, and flowers were beginning to bloom. I had lost a flawed partnership, but I had rediscovered my own strength, and I was raising a daughter who understood the profound difference between material wealth and true integrity. Preston thought he could diminish us. He thought he could secure his happiness by compromising our future. But in the end, he faced the ultimate realization. You cannot build a secure future on a foundation of deception, especially when there is a smart little girl with a cracked tablet paying close attention to your every move. And that is exactly how I reclaimed my life. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It wasn't an easy journey to share, but I hope it serves as a powerful reminder. No matter how challenging the circumstances, the truth will always find its way to the light. If you appreciated this story and want to show your support, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments below if you've ever had a moment where your children noticed something critical that you completely missed. I'd love to hear your experiences. Until next time, stay resilient and always trust your intuition.